Welcome to Insights in Sound, where we talk to the people behind the scenes, behind the technology, and behind the music. People you may not know, but you should.
My guest is live sound engineer Pablo Wheeler. Pablo's credits include David Bowie, David Byrne, Bob Dylan, Johnny Cash, Tears for Fears, St. Vincent, Odessa, and a plethora of others. Let's get into a little bit of background. How'd you get started in this crazy business?
Well, I was playing in bands in upstate New York from the time I was 14 up until I dropped out of school, and which was 22, and decided that I wanted to pursue a full-time music career as an engineer because I'd been doing sound for all the bands that I'd been working for. So I basically just packed a duffel bag and moved to Nashville. And that's I got a job at Waylon Jennings' brother's studio as basically just a gopher. And then a very popular sound company at the time, Carlo Sound in Nashville, gave me a shot. I started out just painting speaker boxes.
Interesting. I'm just thinking, especially in those days, culture shock of moving from upstate New York to Nashville right there. That was an interesting decision.
Nashville certainly wasn't like it is now then, for sure. I mean, Lower Broadway was basically just pimps and the Ernest Tubb record shop.
Right. I remember a few summer NAMM shows back then, and it was definitely not the city it is now and not the music scene it is now.
It was interesting, but I mean, it was always good though. But all the music actually, before I went to work for Carlo Sound, I worked for a club that's still there now, even though it's changed ownership a million times. The Exit Inn, which is right on Liston Place. It's last I went there last year. It's still there.
It's still there. So you didn't actually necessarily go into things. I mean, obviously, you went with the intention of being a live sound guy, but your first gigs obviously were not really mixing bands, I take it.
No. And I was undecided whether or not I wanted to pursue a career in the studio or be a live sound engineer. But basically, the first time I got a shot at Carlo, it was at a festival out in Franklin, Tennessee, of actually sitting behind a desk during a show. I was sold then. It's a constant adrenaline rush, whereas hours in the studio can sometimes just be so tedious.
That's interesting because that was going to be my next question. A lot of people who are of a technical bent, they choose either live sound or the studio. And I think you do have to be something of an adrenaline junkie to go for live sound. And, it's definitely a lot of different challenges.
Absolutely the truth. You don't get it back. you can't edit it.
There's no undo key, right?
Yeah, no, none whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. So what was your first official gig where you, sitting behind a desk, you knew it was really serious and this was what you were going to do?
That would have been Johnny Cash.
How'd that happen? You don't just go from nowhere to Johnny Cash.
Well, curiously enough, at that time, Johnny wasn't really cool. It was, the accounts that we had at Carlo included the Eagles, Linda Ronstadt, Jackson Browne, Poco, Procol Harum, Ike and Tina Turner, and Johnny Cash was sort of, who's ever left in the shop gets to go on the Johnny Cash tour, and that's how I got to step up.
Oh, because he was, that's right. He was sort of already a bit passé at that point, wasn't he?
Oh, it was, yeah. In 1976. Yeah, absolutely. It was the Billy Graham era. And, it just didn't have the ring that other popular music acts had at the time.
So was he your first gig going on the road as well?
Yes. Yeah, I went with a little Converse bag about this big for a suitcase.
You fool. Well, and that's interesting. I mean, I think a lot of people that I talk to, they go into touring with a completely different view of it. And then they learn a lot of, the little stuff you learn, like, feet towards the front of the bus and stuff like that, I think those are kind of rude awakenings, aren't they?
Well, at that time, buses weren't like they are now either. And I remember on that tour, well, for most of the tour, I drove the band gear. So I would have to drive between shows. And my partner and I, who mixed monitors, Mark Hunt, who now has been working for the Oak Ridge Boys for at least 8,000 years, we would just be up all night driving in between shows and maybe grab an hour of sleep before we had to load in to go back and do another one.
To be young and indestructible, huh?
Oh, man. And I can't tell you how many drugs and how much alcohol was consumed back then, too, in the 22-foot Ryder truck. We're lucky to be alive. Let's put it that way.
There are a lot of challenging aspects to doing a tour, but there's also a lot of fun stuff, right?
Oh, the fun was nonstop. And, to a certain degree, it still is. I enjoyed this last year. I was with Odessa, and I don't think I ever had more fun on any tour ever in my entire 45-year career.
What was your most challenging gig technically and your most challenging gig musically? And are they the same?
No, I think technically probably St. Vincent, because Annie demands a lot from her sound engineers. And she uses such a plethora of effects and gizmos and gadgets. And it was always something new. She'd bring something new to the table every time. And that was, I won't say it was the most challenging musically. I think Bob Dylan was the most challenging musically, without a doubt.
That's what I thought you would say. That he seems to me like probably very little in terms of not necessarily structure, but let's say just a lot of sort of free-spirited kind of planning, so to speak.
Yeah, free-spirited on his part, but not for the rest of the band.
Sure. Well, you got to have something more in you down, right?
Yeah, Bob was interesting in the fact that he would rearrange so many songs on a daily basis at sound check. And then, it was up to the band to remember the changes for the show. And quite often, I don't think Bob remembered the changes that he instituted during sound check. Musically, it was always challenging. And some nights would be just magical, and other nights would be train wrecks. That guy doesn't do anything conventional in his entire life. And he's probably, I've been fortunate to work for probably quite a few artists like Bowie, whatever, that you could consider geniuses. But Bob is really a genius, but I also think he's got a touch of autism.
I actually wondered if there was a little bit of autism or something there, because he also seems to be, if you think about somebody like Bowie or David Byrne's another one that you've worked with that I think is brilliant. I think they seem to, at least they give the impression of being focused. Maybe completely focused in a different direction every 15 minutes, but focused when they are in that direction, very much so. Mm-hmm. And Bob seems to be a little bit more, kind of wherever it lands to certain.
That's absolutely true. And I really love his new record. Have you heard the new record?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
It's I think a big comeback for him. I thought the last couple of projects he had, including the old, regurgitating old tunes, I thought, well, maybe the cabinet's empty, but this new record I think is quite stunning.
Well, it's interesting. I had this conversation with someone the other day about how artists, when they're not hungry anymore, if you think about somebody like, McCartney or Paul Simon or some of the great songwriters of that era, it's been a long time since they really wrote something momentous, because, there's not that that hunger, that inspiration that there may have been years ago?
Well, honestly, I think you can definitely say that for Sir Paul, but I think Paul Simon has put out his last couple albums have been quite good, but they've been largely ignored.
I'll have to go back and check him out. But I do think that is it. I think it's a common syndrome for a lot of artists, and that's why I was pleased to hear some of the tracks from Dylan's new album and think like, yeah, there's still something there.
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt about it. For a couple of years, I was able to juggle Dylan and Bowie together, which was amazing to me, considering how much Dylan works. I mean, we'd always do over 100 shows a year, but somehow I managed to fit in David in there too, until one day I couldn't, and I knew, Bob was my big money maker. So, and David was pretty upset that I was leaving the tour. And that was the end of my work with David Bowie.
I'm also thinking, kind of the brain shift between mixing those two different kinds of band. What era of Bowie was this?
It was 98 through 2004.
Okay, so that's quite a different musical mix.
Oh, it couldn't be more polar opposite.
Bouncing between Bowie and Dylan, that's got to be just a mental shift of epic proportions.
Well, you know how we just discussed how free range Bob could be with his arrangements and so forth. I mean, with Bowie, in the 6 years that I was there, I swear we spent so much more time in rehearsal than we ever did doing shows and being on tour. And we always were down in, lower Manhattan, down at CMS. It was Big Mike's back then. And Mark Platty was the musical director throughout that entire time. And man, he was a taskmaster. They rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed. And yeah, it was completely different.
Yeah, it seems to me that his concepts in general would be very, very tightly rehearsed, because a lot of that is you've got almost choreography to a certain extent, and
Absolutely.
I mean, that's got to be a much different gig than going out with the hippies and Bob,
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me about your most disastrous gig.
The single most disastrous gig?
Well, you may have more than one. I don't know.
Well, no, there have been millions of disasters, but I think the one that sticks out in my mind was the night of my birthday. I think it was 1986, and I was working for Rick James, and he was not easy to work for. I mean, obviously he had a reputation, but that night, apparently his management company hadn't paid the bus drivers. So we were playing the Buffalo Memorial Auditorium, which was Buffalo was his hometown. And so it was a really stressful gig. And then after the show, we all went and headed towards the bus, and all our suitcases were lying open on the sidewalk outside the venue. And people had come and just taken whatever they wanted out of our suitcases and just, rifled through everything. And it was just lying in a big heap. And we didn't have hotel rooms, and we had no idea how we were going to even get to the next show. So that night sticks out as being particularly bad. I mean, because it was my birthday too. And I remember I just sat on the sidewalk and sobbed.
Wow. I mean, did somebody leave the bus open, or how did that happen?
No, the drivers just threw our shit onto the sidewalk and said,
nice.
"To hell with these guys. We're leaving. We're going back to," I think it was Ego Trips, or I can't remember the bus company.
Wow. You had told me another one once that I also thought was amusing, about Hunter Thompson on monitors.
Oh yeah. We were playing, we were Telluride. I think it was Telluride. And Hunter showed up on the side of the stage, and our monitor engineer, Jules Arts, may rest in peace, saw him and immediately went over to him and said, "Hey, Hunter, you want to mix monitors for Bob?" And Hunter was just basically, "Yeah, man, put me in, coach." And so he just stood there, and he just stood in front of the board And then Bob looked over and saw him and completely fell over laughing. He couldn't finish the song. And literally, the song fell completely apart.
Share with me another an interesting and little known factoid about one of your clients. Something you can share, of course.
Well, David Byrne rode bicycles everywhere he could around the world. He always had a bicycle with him. And I was always impressed with that. And I don't know whether you know this, Daniel, but he was commissioned at one point to design bike racks around New York City.
That's interesting. I knew he had a reputation for being spotted riding his bike around the village a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and he always had a helmet with a raccoon tail glued to the back of it.
That seems somehow apropos.
Have you seen his website, his new website called Things to Be Cheerful For?
No, I have to look at that. I was very, very disappointed. Last time I was in New York, I was leaving literally one day before his show opened.
Yeah, it was stunning. That show was brilliant.
Do you talk to younger people now who want to go into live sound? Do you ever have conversations with them?
Well, I occasionally did seminars for Full Sail, and with a panel of my colleagues. And I think that young people today really, I don't know, and maybe this is true in a lot of businesses or artistic and cultural, I don't know. Yeah, maybe more so in the arts, that kids are coming out of these schools and they think they're going to be Grammy-winning producers or engineers, or they're going to get something handed to them. And, and they don't really realize, especially in my field, what a life sacrifice is involved with even starting in this business. I mean, the amount of time I've spent away from my family, the only way I could compare it is being a lifelong serviceman who's always off in Afghanistan or, the Congo or whatever. I mean, the sacrifice is tremendous. And I've seen so many young kids come and go because of, the extraordinary sacrifice you have to be willing to make to go on the road. Sometimes, I mean, gee whiz, I did this Chicago Beach Boys tour. I was mixing Chicago. I didn't see home for over a year. And that's brutal for anybody.
It is. And I think people don't realize that, it's true of almost every job in this industry, but I think especially one that involves being on the road. I mean, it's, I think you're right. A lot of younger people, they come out of school thinking, it's all going to happen quickly. And the truth of the matter is the 20-year overnight success thing is really pretty much the truth.
You're right. It's absolutely true. And, I mean, it's still this business. My end of this business is still a word of mouth sort of thing. You can have a really nice looking resume and have graduated from, an Ivy League school in sound reinforcement, but no one's going to pay attention to you until a production manager talks to another production manager who talks to a tour manager who talks to a manager, and your name gets circulated. And that's how I've always gotten work. It has never been really, I've had to send my resume in just, as a, okay, please, yeah, we want you, but send us a resume anyway.
As a formality, yeah.
Yeah, as a mere formality, for sure. Mm-hmm. It's still a word of mouth business.
It is, and I think it's also, a lot of it has to do with human psychology. The great commandment of just don't be a jerk. Treat everybody well, and I think that's true, especially in anything having to do with the music business. You can be the most talented amazing at whatever you do. And if you're an asshole, nobody's going to work with you.
Absolutely. And they're especially not going to want to get on a 12 bunk bus with you and spend the next 6 months listening to your flatulence. You have to be able to get along with people.
It's true. And I think you have to be really, in every sense, the classic definition of a team player. You have to be willing to help out others and really, help them the way you would hope they help you, because it all comes around. Yeah,
no doubt about that. And particularly with people like backline guys and production managers and so forth, almost always, all the good ones all have the ability to wear many different hats and pitch in with whatever's necessary to be done.
Sure. And that's the thing, too, is they all understand, each and every one of them, every job to a certain extent. Even though they're not doing that job, they know if you're doing a good job. They know if you need help. They know if something's going wrong. And that, I think, is, the ability to sort of see the big picture, so to speak, is really what's going to help you out. Because on the road, you really are. You're this insulated little world.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. Want to plug anything you're working on or anything like that? What are you doing these days?
I'm just writing songs and practicing the piano and gardening. I'm doing a lot of gardening.
I just keep thinking of that Spinal Tap gardening accident thing. You got to be careful. I had to laugh when I saw that thing about Brian May, injuring himself in the garden,
It can happen anywhere.
It's true, man. It's true. Pablo Wheeler, thanks for being my guest.
Daniel, I thank you for the opportunity, and I thought your questions were really pretty spot on. It was fun.
Cool. I'm glad.
My pleasure.